Hello, friends, and welcome to 2023. Yes, I know I'm a little late to this party, certainly late getting this up. We are in February of 2023 by now, but I did still want to share with you all my favorite places of 2022, and better late than never. All in all, I visited roughly 25 or 30 holy places last year, but I've narrowed it down to my personal top 10 favorites. So let's dive right in. Number 10 is the Shrine of the Most Holy Redeemer in Las Vegas, Nevada. I did do a video on this late last year, specifically focused on this church, which is hidden right behind the Tropicana Hotel on the Las Vegas Strip. In general, I don't personally tend to veer towards the more modern churches, my preference being more classic designs. But the colors of the mosaics in the altar are really very eye-catching, and I particularly liked the scenes of Christ, which seem to be suspended in niches along the walls. They're really quite captivating, as a matter of fact. The rest of the church is very simplistic and aesthetically plain, maybe even somewhat more on the boring side. But this makes the list for me for its unique elements and the fact that it really did take me by surprise. Number 9 is St. Xenia Church in Payson, Utah. This one was also featured in an earlier video showcasing 5 different religious buildings in Utah that are not affiliated with the Latter-day Saints. This Eastern Orthodox church is extremely new, so new in fact that the iconography on the walls and ceiling have yet to be completed. It is, however, open for worship and for visitors, and the details that are so far finished really are quite striking and just beautiful. St. Xenia itself is a very small church. It has 3 gilded domes on the exterior. The current iconography is very colorful and fills the limited space beautifully, in my opinion. I hope they're able to finish this church in the near future, and of course I do plan to visit again once that full project is complete. Number 8 is St. Bernadette's in Scottsdale, Arizona. Now, St. Bernadette Church was one I actually discovered by accident on Instagram, believe it or not. And the reason I found that is because it recently underwent a redesign by a company I follow called Conrad Schmidt Studios. Their goal is to refurbish and even beautify churches, an endeavor I wholeheartedly support, by the way, and one at which they happen to be very, very good. As someone who is adamantly in favor of adding beauty to the world, and especially to our churches, I really love seeing what this company does, and they did a post about their refurbishment. St. Bernadette's was originally a fairly plain church, done in a Romanesque style with a very basic white interior and very little ornamentation. But now, the transformation is just stunning. This redesign incorporates gilding, a fresh blue and gold theme, and even painted ceilings, which admittedly are a bit of a weakness of mine. The new interior uses a great deal of symbolism to create a vision of the kingdom of God. The murals that can now be viewed on the ceiling are masterfully done, and they evoke the classic ceiling frescoes of your European churches. There are in all 9 panels, which represent events from the life of Christ as well as saints, with an emphasis on the Virgin Mary and her earthly life. The mural in the apse behind the high altar depicts the American saints with Mary in the center. Conrad Schmidt Studios also included new stained glass windows, of course a staple of Christian churches, and I think it's safe to say that the new look takes my breath away and makes the space feel, in my opinion, a little more like a church. Number 7 is the Immaculate Heart of Mary Church in San Antonio, Texas. I actually visited several churches in San Antonio, but this one was the one that stood out most. It's got a very unique and distinctive look. This is considered one of 3 painted churches in San Antonio. Built originally in 1912, the church was designed with a mix of Byzantine and Romanesque styles. The color, though, is what ultimately draws the eye here. That green-blue, a color that shifts slightly depending on the light, is incredibly pretty and certainly memorable. There are, of course, multiple stained glass windows, most of them set in small niches that serve as side chapels. The other thing that drew my eye in this case was the pink color of the altar. The church also has an interesting tie to history, in fact. Immaculate Heart of Mary Church inherited a church bell that originally belonged to the San Fernando Cathedral. That bell was the one that sounded the fall of the Alamo in 1836. Number 6 is the Latter-day Saint Temple in Tucson, Arizona. I visited multiple temples in Arizona last year, including Mesa, Phoenix, and Gilbert, but for me, the one that stood out in particular was the Tucson Temple. Situated in the Catalina foothills north of the Sonoran Desert, the landscaping incorporates local fauna such as red cactus flowers and prickly pear cactus plants, lots of cactus. My favorite feature, however, of this temple is that beautiful blue dome. Domes are much less common in LDS temples, and the blue color, of course, is certainly more unique even for that. The original plans for this temple did actually include a tall steeple rather than that dome, which of course is a lot more typical for the LDS temples. But due to the requirement of special permits, the plans were altered to feature the dome instead, a dome modeled after the cathedral in Florence, Italy. Personally, I think the dome actually works even better for this one, and it looks quite spectacular in the sunrise. Number 5 for me was the Cathedral Basilica of St. Francis of Assisi in Santa Fe, New Mexico. My original reason for going to Santa Fe was to see the famous Loretto Chapel. It's this classic little church known for its miraculous staircase. And while I did enjoy that church very much, it ended up being St. Francis of Assisi just around the corner that really got my attention. This is certainly a much, much grander church than the Loretto Chapel. It's also the mother church of the Archdiocese of Santa Fe, built in the mid to late 1800s. It was built in Romanesque Revival style on the spot of an older church, which was also built upon an even older church dating back to 1626. This cathedral has incredible stained glass windows depicting the 12 apostles. I always love stained glass, and these windows are honestly some of the prettiest I've seen. I also happened to be there when the light was starting to come through the windows on one side. This was early in the morning, and it created such a neat effect that was kind of breathtaking, honestly. Those windows, as well as the rose window, were all imported from France. In 2009, they also added a small round stained glass window featuring a dove that's the symbol of the Holy Spirit in Christianity. That dove is actually a replica of a piece created by the artist Bernini for St. Peter's Basilica in Rome. My other favorite part of this church is the La Conquistadora Chapel. This is in the north transept and is actually the oldest part of the church. It's a remnant of the earlier church that was incorporated into the new one. This chapel houses a wooden Madonna, known as La Conquistadora, which was brought to New Mexico in 1626 and is believed to be the oldest Madonna in the U.S. That gilded reredos is built from pieces of the original church altars with oil paintings of saints from an artist of the Mexican Baroque period. And of course, we all know how I love Baroque. Altogether, this cathedral was an incredible find and one I highly recommend, especially if you happen to be visiting the Loretto Chapel. This is literally right around the corner. You can't miss it. Number 4 is the Tibetan Buddhist Center, also as it happens in Santa Fe. I have been to a number of Buddhist temples over the past few years, but this one was very different from those I typically visit, and I absolutely loved it. It was started in about the year 2000 by a man who spent a year in the Kopan Monastery in the Kathmandu Valley of Nepal. The entire temple is really quite small. Mostly it's just a shrine, but it's very impactful. That crisp white exterior is pretty striking against the blue skies of New Mexico, and then those adornments of blue and red and gold just really stand out. Unfortunately, there was no one to let me inside, but just the exterior was a treat for me, and maybe one of these days I'll be able to go back and view the interior. Number 3 is the Little Flower Basilica in San Antonio, Texas. The Little Flower Basilica is a minor basilica built during the Great Depression. In the early 1900s, Mexican immigrants fleeing religious persecution formed communities around San Antonio. Carmelite friars who had managed to escape execution during the revolutions latched on to this country's faith revival and the teachings of the newly canonized Saint Teresa of Lisieux, a Carmelite nun known as the Little Flower. She is quoted as saying, "When I die, I will let fall a shower of roses from the heavens. I will spend my heaven doing good on earth." Pope Pius X called her the greatest saint of modern times, and this basilica was the first in the country to be dedicated to her. There is a tomb chapel modeled after the one that exists in France, honoring their patron saint. And this chapel houses several relics, including a shard of bone believed to belong to Saint Teresa, housed in a ring on one hand, and a small cross resting in the other. For me, though, what blew me away was the high altar. the detail, the beautifully carved and painted figures, the tiny little mosaics, a motif represented throughout the church, by the way. These little mosaics are all over the place. All of it just combines to great effect. The figures really almost seem to move. There's energy in the carvings, and they're very, very graceful. I really wish more people today were dedicated to this kind of elegant craftsmanship. It's hard to take your eyes away, and the more you look, the more you seem to find in it. So for me, the altar alone is worth visiting this church. Number 2 is the Bodhiana Meditation Monastery in Las Vegas, Nevada. I visited a surprising number of Buddhist temples in Las Vegas last year. It really shocked me how many there are. Any of them could have made a list like this, honestly, but the one that truly stunned me was this one, this meditation center. This is a Thai Buddhist temple, and the monk who guided me through actually did move to America from Thailand. He was a very sweet man and very excited to take me through all the little shrines in the temple complex, some of which I'd have probably missed without his direction. There are several altars throughout, housed in various buildings and rooms, including a golden Buddha, but the absolute highlight for me was this incredible altar in red and blue. That color combination is just pretty awesome, and its bold designs stand out quite well. I'm always really drawn to colors, and I think that's why this had such an impact on me personally. I did love the details as well, the various shapes and figures, but that color combo had such wow factor for me. Before I get to my top pick of 2022, just a brief reminder to my viewers that every little like, comment, and subscribe helps us grow and see more places like this to share with you all. Please consider taking just a quick moment to hit that subscribe button or like and share the video, or please drop a comment below and tell us which one your favorite is. You can also find 1000 Holy Places on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. We do hope you'll join us on this journey. All right, are you ready for number 1? Number 1 is the San Xavier del Bac Mission in Tucson, Arizona. This Catholic mission dates back to 1692. Most of the original work has been reworked or replaced and largely rebuilt in the late 1700s, but this is considered to be the oldest intact European structure in Arizona. This church is an example of Spanish Baroque, and once again, you know me and my Baroque, I'm gonna go to the Baroque places. It's still an active church, still holds services, but anyone is free to simply visit the church outside of those service hours. There is a barrier during visits, however, so that people don't get too close and touch the obviously aging details. A lot of the color has faded, much of the gilding that was clearly once there has flaked off or been rubbed clean, but the impact is still really fantastic, especially as this church is incredibly small. Only a few visitors can come in at a time. I actually had to go through twice to get the photos that I wanted. The sculptures were likely created in guild workshops, then carried by donkey to the mission itself, where clothing was then gessoed onto the figures by local artisans. And as is typical of Baroque art, the effect is somewhat playful, dramatic, and even theatrical. There are curtain displays and even faux doors, adding a little of that Baroque whimsy. Many repairs have been done, including significant fixes following a massive earthquake in 1887 and ongoing restoration of the facade. In fact, while I was there was scaffolding on one of the towers at the facade, so I don't have a lot of good exterior photos. I'd love to see what it had looked like, freshly painted and gilded, but even today, it's a striking church and tops my list of 2022 holy places. So there it is, my top 10 for 2022, and now it's time to get started on my journeys for 2023. Looking forward to talking to you about all of that later.